Okay guys, so we've got to the end of this tutorial series, and we're going to complete this series by building a quick video wall, breaking it up into pieces using the Xplode plugin, and then we're going to have the gun rip it apart. So before we get started with that, I just want to quickly show that I cleaned up my object manager a little bit, and it was getting a little cluttered, and I had a lot of stuff just kind of thrown about. So what I did was I just took all the pieces for the gun, excluding the target. I left the target out, and then I just grouped them inside of a main null, and I took all the lights and things like that that would be scene elements like the floor, the sky, the HDR sphere that we are not using. I left it there anyway, and the light dome, and of course I just kind of grouped all of those into a null. That way we get a nice clean object manager. Okay, so to create the video wall, we're just going to create a cube, and I'm going to name this video wall. And you can see that I kind of made my floor a lot bigger than what it was before, and that's just because I want to make sure that this floor object is going to be wide enough and long enough in order to be able to catch all the pieces that are going to be kind of being thrown around with the dynamics here for this wall once it starts breaking apart. So I'm going to pull this down and maybe about there. And I know that the video that I want to use for the video texture that's going to go on this video wall, I know that the aspect ratio is 16:9. And the video, of course, I'm just going to reuse part of the Apple Soldier video that I did in my original animation. And the video is 1280x720, which is 16:9. So what I want to do is keep this video wall with the same type of aspect ratio. So I'm going to go to the video wall and go to the object tab, and for the X value I'm going to type in 1280, the Y I'm going to type in 720. Okay, so there's the wall. Now the only problem with it is it's kind of small. So if we just grab the scale tool and scale it up, it will maintain that 16:9 aspect ratio, and then all we have to do is just pull it up where it sits above the floor. So about right there. Okay, and it's a little too thick for my taste, so I'm going to bring the thickness down to maybe half. So half, let's just say 800. That would be 400, so we'll try that, and that looks a lot better. Okay, so before we make this editable and start chopping it up, remember in a previous part of this tutorial series, I was talking about the bevel tool and how I would really like it if Maxon was to go back in and update their modeling tools and to just make an improvement over that, especially in order to give us a proper bevel when we want to use it. But in this case, there's a really nice feature for the primitive object, which is the primitive cube. And if you go here into the attributes for the cube, you have this little option here called fillet. So if we were to enable that, we get a proper bevel on the corners. So we can adjust the radius and the subdivision. And I think I'm going to use a subdivision of 4. And I'm going to take the fillet radius to, maybe we'll try, no, maybe we want to go a little more, 35. So there we have a proper bevel. Now we can just get rid of all those sharp edges, and now you can see we have a proper bevel here in that corner versus what the bevel tool was doing. Okay, so now we can take this video wall and make it editable. I'm going to go into polygon mode, grab my live selection tool, and I'm going to select the front face here of this video wall or video monitor, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to choose the extrude inner tool, and I'm going to extrude this in a little bit, and it's going to keep that 16:9 aspect ratio, and I only want to go in just a little bit. I don't want to go too far. Okay, so maybe about there. That looks pretty good. Now at this point, if you want to, you can also extrude and make an extrusion inward. But for something like this, I really don't want to have an extrusion. I'm just going to leave it flat across the front. So with that front polygon selected for the screen, I'm going to call up the set selection command, and it's going to make a selection tag here for us, and I'm going to call this video, and then I'm going to hit UI. That's going to invert the selection for us, which means anything we had selected will be deselected, and anything that was not selected will be selected. So it just inverts it. And now we need to make another set selection. But before we do this, we need to deselect that current selection tag here. And you notice there's a little orange box around it, which means that it is currently selected. So if we were to call up the set selection command, it's going to overwrite the previous selection that we made for the screen. And it's not going to create a second tag for us. It's actually going to just keep this tag that's here, but it's just going to apply the new selection to it. So what you want to do is just deselect everything there, then select your object again, and then call up the set selection command, and now that will make a second tag with this second selection that we have. Now, in previous versions of Cinema 4D, which I don't know if any of you were actually using them, but in release 9, when R9 first came out, Maxon had a really nice little feature here that whenever you made a set selection tag and you typed in the name, it would automatically deselect itself. That way, if you want to make another set selection, you didn't have to come up here and deselect the tag and then click the object again in order to make another set selection. Now, as far as I know, this little hassle here of having to deselect that selection tag is still happening in R12, so I don't think that Maxon has actually updated this. And to be honest, it kind of sucks because that just kind of slows down your workflow because you have to deselect that and then reselect the object in order to make a second set selection. So now since we have these, we can go ahead and just deselect those polygons, and we're going to click on this one and we're going to call this, perhaps I'm just going to call it black. Okay, so now we can just take the black that we use for the gun and drag that over to the video wall, drag the set selection tag down here to the selection link box, and now the black has only been applied to the monitor that we want, and now we need to make a video texture. Now in this case, I'm going to be using the video from Apple Soldier's video that I did before, and I'm only going to be using just a quick 15-second clip, a little snippet from that video. Now when it comes to using videos as textures or any type of thing like that in Cinema 4D, I usually like to work with image sequences. Now, Cinema 4D will recognize AVI files. It will also recognize MP4, MOV, different type of QuickTime formats as well. However, I usually don't like to work with movie files, but rather image sequences. So what I did was I took that Apple Soldier video and saved it as a 720p MP4 off of YouTube, and then I opened it up in my editor, which is Premiere Pro CS5. And then I just made a couple of cuts and then just saved it as a JPEG image sequence at 30 frames per second. So I'm going to create a new material, and I'm going to call this one video. And I want to be able to open up that image sequence here within one of these channels. Now we don't need specular, so I'm going to turn that off. So here's where we need to decide what channel we want to use, the color or the luminance. Now in the case of the color channel, the only way you're going to be able to see this video texture is if it's being hit by a light source. So that means if these pieces break off and fall down, and say a couple of chunks are being hidden within a shadow, then you're not going to be able to see the texture. However, if we use the Luminance channel for our video texture, then regardless of whether a light is hitting it or not, you're going to be able to see it. So seeing as how real-world screens like computer monitors and televisions use Luminance, then we're going to go and use the Luminance channel. So I'm going to go here and load an image. And all I did was I went to my directory where I have my image sequence saved at, and I just clicked on the very first image in the image sequence. So now we want to go into that, so you just need to click here on the file name. That'll take you into the properties, and we want to go over here to the animation tab. So here we have the movie frame rate set to 30 frames per second because that is what we're using here in Cinema 4D, and it is also the movie frame rate of our video here of Apple Soldier. So we need to click on calculate, And now Cinema 4D has automatically calculated that the movie start frame is 0 and the movie end frame is 505. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is apply this over here to our video wall. And I'm just going to bring this over and then apply the set selection tag to the link box here. And you'll notice that, just a little quick tip here, you'll notice that the black has disappeared. And that was the black here that we had. And when we click on the black, the video texture disappears. But if we go and click on the video texture, it reappears, but the black is gone. And the reason for this is because whenever you click on a texture, it will single out that texture so you can work with it, and it will make all the other ones invisible. So if we click on the texture tag here for the video wall, you can see if we had any other set selections here, they would all disappear. And then if we click on the black, we can now work with the black, and the video texture is now no longer there. So if you want to see all of them, you just need to deselect your texture tags. So if we want to view this texture movie plain, then you would just scrub through your timeline. But you'll notice that the video is not plain. So what we need to do is go over here to the material editor, and we need to go to the editor, and then we need to enable the animate preview. And now when we play through the timeline, now the video plays. Just like that. Okay, so what we want to do now is kind of move this video around, because if we go to a front view here, actually this is a back view, but it is forward facing our video wall. So if you notice here that we've got these black dividing lines, and of course that's because whenever this guy here made his video, it was not in a widescreen format, so he got the black bars on the side. Now you notice this one over here is really thin and this one over here is a little wider, and I would like to take this whole thing and kind of slide it over to kind of center it. So let's click on the video texture. And of course yours may be a little different than this, but if you do encounter this problem, then here's how you fix it. You need to go over here to the offset. Now it's set to UVW mapping, which is fine. And we want to go to the offset for the X, and then we just need to click this a couple of times in the negative value, and now our video is centered. And it's time to cut this thing up. But before we do, I need to work on the lighting a little bit. So if we hit render, you can see here that we're getting this radial pattern. And the radial pattern is being caused, of course, by the light dome. Now, right after I made the last tutorial part about the lighting, I went in here and I made a few changes. And we're going to go over those changes. Now, when it comes to the lighting, I want the light dome to be able to hit the floor. And remember in one of the first parts where we did the lighting, I made it so that the light dome was not affecting the floor, because we were getting that radial pattern of shadowing. So if you go into your light for your light dome, there we go, and we go over here to the scene tab. You want to be sure that anything you have in there, you want to be able to take that out. So if you have any objects in here, you just need to right click on them and just choose remove. Now what that's going to do is it's going to enable it so the lights from the light dome will now be striking the floor, and of course it gives the dark shading that we want around the base of the video wall here to prevent it to look like it's floating, but at the same time it's giving this nasty radial pattern which we want to eliminate. So what I did was I took the sphere and I took the radius up further to 25,000, and then I went to the light and we go into the, let's see, where's the shadow tab. And what I did was I enabled the shadow cone option, and I also enabled soft cone. And then I changed the shadow map to 500 by 500. However, even with those settings, you can still see that this video wall is producing some really nasty looking shadows here. And we've got some of this shadowing over here, and that just doesn't look right. So what I'm going to do real quick is just change my anti-alias settings to best. I want to be able to view the shadowing without any jagged lines in it. Okay, so we want to be able to fix this so we get nice soft shading versus all of these lines. So let's just try something like a value of 250 by 250 for the shadow map. Okay, now that eliminated quite a bit of it. but we're still getting some unwanted stuff back here on the back side. You can see we've got some really nasty looking stuff going on right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the video wall and I'm going to pull it in a little closer to the gun. And I'm also going to take it and shrink it down just a little bit, because this video wall here is actually a little larger than the one I made in my original animation. Okay, so now let's try it again. And now you can see we're getting a lot better results out of this. So now we're getting some nice shading around the video wall, and we eliminated those hard shadows. And then back here on the back side, we eliminated all of that nasty stuff there as well. Okay, so now we've got the lighting completed, and I'm just going to close that up. And now it's time to use the Xplode plugin to chop this wall up. Okay, so there's two ways that we can cut this video wall up. The first way is we could just use the Xplode plugin here, and we can just click Add. Let's click on it first, and we can click Add, and of course that will generate a random amount of particles here for us, depending on the attribute here, number of parts. And then we can cut it up like that. And of course that's the way I did it in my original animation. However, in this case, what I would like to do is go a step further, and I would like to be able to make a custom cut. That way we can get smaller pieces as well as having larger pieces. So I'm just going to click clear to get rid of those. And I'm going to go into a forward front view here. And I'm going to grab a spline, and I'm just going to use a cubic spline. And what I want to do is I want to cut out a path. And this is the path that the gun is going to be following. So I'm just going to hit Alt-D to make those handles invisible. And I'm just going to draw a path that the target object is going to be following. Okay, so maybe something like that. So here is our spline, and I'm going to duplicate it, turn the second one off, and we'll go back to the first one, and we need to move this over just a little bit there. And that looks good. Okay, so let's go and grab a circle spline, and we need also a sweep NURB. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to generate, or we want to create some geometry that's going to be used to generate particles. So we need to grab these two splines and drag them into the sweep NURB. And of course that's a little too big, so we're going to take the circle spline and come down with it. Okay, so maybe a value of 35. So if we select the sweep NURB object, you can see that it kind of looks like it's solid white, and it's not really solid white. It's just that there are a lot of subdivisions in the sweep NURB, and the camera is back off at a distance to where those lines really can't be seen, and it just looks like it's all solid white. So if we go in closer, you can see the closer we get, the more these lines are going to start to appear, and now you can see that there is way too many subdivisions in there. So let's go to the circle spline, and I'm going to change the intermediate points to uniform, and we'll bring this down to a value of 1. Then we're going to choose the spline here for the path, and we're going to change the intermediate points here to, let's try 15. We'll click on it, and now that looks a lot better. Okay, that'll work for us. So what we want to do now is take the sweep NURB, and we want to be able to make it editable and use it for geometry, because it needs to be made editable in order to become an emitter. So let's just make it editable, and then I'll open it up and I'll delete these two caps because we really don't need them right now. And I'm just going to rename this to Emitter. Now you can see right now that even though we have it selected, the object handle for it is way back over here. So we need to call up the Axis Center tool, and if we hit execute, that will center the axis handle to that object. And to get to that, you just need to go to Structure, Axis Center, Axis Center. Okay, so we want to be able to position this at the front of the wall, and it needs to go in just a little bit, so maybe about right there. And we want to go to the content browser, and we want to go into the presets, and we want to go to the emitter list, and we want to double click volume emitter. Okay, so there's the volume emitter. We need to go to the thinking particle settings, and we need to open this up a little bit, and you need to unfold the all group here, and Xplode will be in there if you have your Xplode plugin. Now for those of you that don't have Xplode, there are some other cutters or cutting plugins like Xplode. One of them is called Destruction, but that plugin was kind of canceled a while back, and I don't think the creator of that plugin actually did any more with it, and it was kind of unstable and caused some crashing, and sometimes it would give unwanted results. Now there's also another one by Nitro Man, and that one is, I believe it's pronounced Throsy. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And that one cuts pretty good as well, but I don't know if that one actually works with thinking particles. Now Xplode, when we call up Xplode here, Xplode works with thinking particles, which means you can use thinking particles to create custom cuts, which is what we're going to be doing here with this wall. But in the case of Throsy or Destruction, I don't think those have the ability to do that. So I don't have that installed. I don't have those plugins. I only have Xplode. So if you don't have Xplode, then you're just going to have to use one of the other ones and just kind of skip through this part if they don't work with thinking particles. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of move some of this around, and I'm going to go over here to the TP volume emitter, go to the thinking particles tab, and here we have particle group. So what we want to do is take the Xplode group and drag that into the particle group. The shape, leave that blank. The polygon object needs to be the emitter. And that's all we have to do for that. So I'll click off of the thinking particle settings. And I did not want to expand that. Okay, so what we want to do now is hit play. And you can see that there are some little thinking particles that are popping up here and there, but we want a lot more than that. And what we want is a high concentration. Well, we really don't want to go too high, but we want a high density of particles in the shape of this sweep NURB. And then we want to have just a few random particles here and there for the rest of the wall. So we need to go back, and I'm going to go back to the beginning of the timeline, and we need to go to some settings here. First of all, we want to go to the speed, and I'm going to take the speed up to maybe about 280, and the type, I'm going to change this to shot. So hit play, and there we go. And that only played for roughly 8 frames, and you can see we've got quite a bit of particles there already. So I'm just going to leave that like that because I don't want to go too high, because when I make the cut, I don't want to have a whole lot of pieces here. Otherwise, it's going to slow the viewport down, and it's just going to take that longer to play through the timeline, and also when it comes to render time. So for the number of parts, I'm going to take this down to maybe something like 45. And I'm going to click, before you click add, you need to go over here and click on the object, and we want to click add. Okay, that will add those points in there for us for the thinking particles. We need to go to, we need to change this to fracture object here, and for the inside material, I'm just going to create a new material. I'm going to go into the color channel, and I'm going to just load up a JPEG image that I have. Alright, so I've just loaded up a basic concrete type texture, a JPEG image, and I've also placed it over in the diffusion channel as well, just to kind of darken it up a little bit. And I'm just going to name this inside. So we'll take this here and place this here over to the inside link box. And then we're going to click on scatter. Be sure that you do have your object selected that you want to scatter, or in this case cut. So we'll click on scatter. Okay, so we have 817 objects, which I guess that's not too bad. That might be a bit much, but we'll just kind of see how this goes. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of the timeline. I'm going to hit clear to clear out those particles, exit out of Xplode, and I'm going to go to the emitter here, the TP volume emitter, and turn it off. Okay, so if we click on the pieces object, you can see basically what we've done here. We've got these larger chunks out towards the outer sides, and then we've got the smaller pieces along the path of that emitter. So now we can just take that emitter object and turn that off. So what we want to do now is right click on the pieces and give it a rigid body tag. And I'm going to take the bounce to 0.1 and the friction to 1. And I'm just going to hit play, and we're going to see what happens here. Okay, so it looks like we've got good interaction with the floor. Okay, so everything looks pretty good. My main concern I want to check is just when these smaller pieces hit the floor object, I just want to make sure that there's not going to be any penetration, and these, we're not going to have any pieces going through the floor. So I'm just going to check underneath the floor, and it looks good. Alright, so let's see what this looks like when we just render this quickly. I want to make sure that the shadowing and the shading and everything looks okay. Alright, now one quick problem that I see here is that you'll notice we have all these lines. And that was the inside material that we used. But now instead of looking like concrete, it looks all stretched and it doesn't look right. So what we need to do is open up the pieces. And we need to click on the material here for that inside texture that we used. And we need to select all of those. Because see, there's quite a bit of them. And we could just do a shift, hold down shift, and then go down to the bottom and select all of them. But you can see every now and then one will appear over here to the very right hand side of those texture tags. And it's just going to make it kind of annoying to have to go through there and to select all those manually. So one way to quickly do this is just to go over here to the material that you have. So what you could do is you can right click on it and then choose select texture tags objects, or you can get to the same command by going to function, and there it is there. So we'll click on that, and now what that's going to do is it's going to click all the objects as well, but it's going to select those texture tags for us. Now we don't have to go through there and select them, and we want to go over here to the projection, and we want to change this to cubic. So let's see what happens if we render now. Alright, so now we've got a really nice cubic projection to these parts, or these pieces. And I just want to zoom in just to kind of get a better look. And you can see that it does look better now. It looks more like concrete rather than stretch noise, but it's missing something. So I think I'm going to go into that material, and I'm going to copy that texture that I have, and I'm just going to paste it into the bump channel. And then I'm going to take the bump and bring it down to about -60. But you can see it really didn't do much. You can see there's a couple little places in there where it might be affecting it. But right now, bump channel relies on black, white, and gray values. And anything that's white is going to represent the maximum height. Anything that's black is going to represent the maximum depth. And a value of 128 RGB gray will be center, or having no effect at all by the bump. So we need to go into this because this is a very light shade of gray. There's very little detail in there. And I'm going to adjust the black and white points for this texture. So you can see I'm adjusting it to make it a little darker. And I'm going to make that one a little lighter. And you can see by doing this, we're actually bringing out the contrast. And now when we render, now you can see it's getting a little more of a bump to it in there. Although we could probably improve it a little bit. What I probably need to do is just choose another type of image, because this concrete image kind of looks rather crappy for this. But I just wanted to illustrate the points, so I just used a very basic texture. Alright, so we could probably play around with that a little bit more. Let's see what happens if we reverse this and go to +60 or somewhere near 60. Alright, so it looks the same. So either way, that looks good enough for now. And let's just copy this one, and I'm going to copy it and paste this one over here into the diffusion. Alright, there we go. Now we're getting a little more of a dirty type of look to it. So that looks pretty good. So I know you're probably thinking, well, why in the world would the inside of a TV monitor be dirty? Well, that's a good question. I have no idea, but I just kind of wanted to throw that texture in there. If we wanted to, we could probably just use the original black, but in this case I think this is just fine. You can use whatever texture you like. Alright, so I'm going to go back to the beginning of the timeline, and all we need to do now is enable the spline that we originally made, and we need to take that spline and we need to push it over here to the front of the TV or this video screen wall that we're making, and we need to push that in right to where it about disappears like that. So now what we're going to do is right click on the main target object, and we're going to go to Cinema 4D tags align to spline. So it's asking for the spline path. We're just going to take that spline, drag it in there. You'll notice that the target instantly jumps to the first point of the spline, and if we animate this position, you can see that the target is following the path of the spline and the gun is tracking and following it. So now all we have to do is animate or keyframe this position value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and go to something like 30 seconds, or not 30 seconds, but 30 frames, which is 1 second. But before I do, I want to be able to kind of go back and forth in the timeline without having any lag. So I'm just going to disable the fracture object, and it'll be a little easier on the viewport. Okay, so there is frame 30. So I'm going to make a keyframe here on frame 30 for a position of 0%. And then I'm going to scroll up here to maybe something like 400. And then I'm going to take this up to 100%. And I'll make another keyframe. Alright, so then what's going to happen here is that the first 30 frames, which is 1 second, the gun is going to start spinning up. And then all through here it's going to be firing and destroying the wall, and when it hits frame 400 it's going to stop firing, and then it's eventually going to take roughly 3 seconds for the barrels to spin down. Okay, so you're probably thinking, okay, this is all great, but how do we destroy the actual wall? Because in the original animation it looked like there were bullets firing out of the gun that were breaking the wall apart. Well, that was only just an illusion. The bullets weren't actually interacting with the wall at all. I was using a MoGraph effector to do the destruction. So what I did was we can click on the main target object, and we need to go to MoGraph, and we need to alt click a plane effector. And we can just take that plane effector and make it a child of the main target. Need to click on pieces, and we need to take this plane effector and drag it down to the effector tab, then drop it into the box. And this plane effector is what's going to be acting as the force to bring these pieces out. Now currently the fall off is set to infinite, and we don't want infinite because that means it will be affecting everything. So we want to change this to box. Okay, and we need to make it, let's go into a side view here. Need to make it a little longer. Bring that in a little bit. And we also need to take the fall off down to 0. Or better yet, let's take it to maybe a value of 35. I'll tell you what, let's go 25. Okay, so something like that. And now when we animate the position of that main target through the align to spline tag, now the plane effector, being a child of the main target, will follow. Okay, so let's turn on the video wall, so I'll just enable the pieces. And let's go over to the effector settings here. And it's currently set to shoot everything up at a value of 100, and we don't want up, we want out. So I'm just going to take that to 0, and we want to go in the plus Z direction. So I'll give that a value of maybe, I don't know, let's try a value of 10, and we'll enable rotation as well, and let's put in some odd values like 35, 45, and 55, and then we'll just hit play. Okay, now it is reacting, but however the rest of the wall is reacting as well. So we want to go in and change a couple things. And the first thing we want to do is go to the rigid body tag for the pieces. And we need to change the trigger from immediate to at velocity peak. Now the only thing that's going to be affected by the dynamics is going to be what this plane effector is going to be affecting. So if we hit play again, okay, now we've got it waiting a minute, and now we've got the pieces being pushed out. Alright, so it's getting there, but I'm not really sure. I think maybe we're getting too much of an explosion here because some of these pieces are really flying out, and I think they're going to go out beyond the floor. And I really don't want them to go out that far. So I'm going to stop, back up, and you can see just how far they're going. We've got one straight piece way over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keyframe this effector. I'm going to go to the effector, go to the effector tab, and I'll bring the strength down to 0%. And I'm going to keyframe it. And I'm going to go up to frame, let's see, let's go to frame 29. Make another keyframe for 0%. I'm going to jump up one frame to where the gun comes on at frame 30, and I'm going to take this up to 100%. I'm going to go back to the parameters, and I'm going to change some things here. I'm going to change these rotational values down quite a bit, so we'll go 15, 5, and maybe 10. Okay, and I'm just going to hide that main target so we can see this a little better. So hit play. Okay, so there's the beginning stages of the wall crumbling, and it doesn't really look like we're getting all that much. I think maybe we need to set the value for the Z direction to be a little stronger. Or what we could do is I'll just pause it, and I'll go back to the effector, and we'll take the Z value here and we'll go out to 15. We'll go to the fall off, and we'll just take the fall off all the way down to 0. So try it again. Alright, so we're getting a little bit more, but it still just doesn't look quite right. And if we render, okay, so we're starting to get there, but it needs something more. So I'm going to take that plane effector, and I'm going to ramp up the parameter here to about 45. And I'm going to take the size of this effector, and I'm going to make it a little bigger. So I'm going to go out in this direction. I'm going to scale it up a little bit as well. Alright, so maybe something like that. So we'll watch it one more time. And there we go. Now we got a lot more braking going on there at the beginning. And it's kind of punching through to the back. And those pieces are sliding around, which looks pretty good. I just want to make sure that these pieces are not going to be going too far and going to be going off of the floor. Now I know these pieces look a little too big, and that's just because I was going to make them smaller, but previous to making this tutorial I actually went through and made some smaller pieces just to see what it would look like. And while it did look better, it took a whole lot longer to play through the animation. And it actually took a little longer to render as well. So if you got the patience to sit there and watch your viewport lag while trying to get everything to look right, then by all means go for it. But in this case, I didn't want this tutorial being too long, you know, with me trying to sit here and work through the timeline with all these little pieces everywhere. So I wanted to make it as quick as possible while trying to illustrate the point, and these pieces here seem to be working for that. Alright, so now we just need to keyframe the gun to come on. So I'm going to just flip off the pieces, and I'm going to go up here to frame 20. I'm going to go to frame 29. Here is the barrel speed controller. Actually, we need to go back to frame 0 because it's going to take a second for this to spin up. So we need to make a keyframe there on 0. We'll go up here to frame 30. Going to spin that up to 720, make another keyframe. And then we're going to come all the way down here to frame 400, make another keyframe, and then go forward 3 seconds. So that would be 490. And then spin it down to 0, make another keyframe. And now for the muzzle flash controller, we just need to go up here to frame 29. Make a keyframe for off, jump forward 1 frame to 30, turn the gun on, go all the way down here to frame 399, make a keyframe, jump forward 1 frame to 400, and just turn the switch off. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and render this out. And before I do that, I need to go into the render settings. So for general, I'll just use the full render for the output. I'm going to go over here to video, and I'm going to choose the 720p 29.9 frames per second, but I'm just going to change that just to 30. We want to do all frames. I'm going to go to the save, and I'm going to save this as a JPEG image sequence, and I'm just going to click here to save it to a directory. Okay, I'm just going to deselect include sound. There's no reason to have any of that, and we're not really going to be doing any multipass for this. There's not really anything that we need to add in After Effects in post, so I'm not going to be including any type of compositing project file because everything is available for us here in Cinema 4D. There really isn't anything that we could do other than perhaps maybe add some glows or something like that, but for this case I really don't see the need for it. Another thing that we could probably do is add some motion blur, and one thing that we could do for the motion blur, we could just kind of check that out real quick, is to go over here and right click on these pieces, go to Cinema 4D tags, if I can get it to come up, and we'll go to motion blur. We'll leave the strength at 100, and then we'll go up here to the render settings again, and we'll go to effect, object motion blur, leave the strength at 100, and now those pieces, when they start flying around, that will kind of put some blur to them just to add some motion blur. Alright, so let's go back to the render settings, and I'm going to go to the save. We got that. Multipass, no need for it. Anti-aliasing is set to best. With a threshold, I'll take down to about 3. Minimum and maximum levels 1 by 2. Everything there looks just fine. Got the object motion blur. And now I'm just going to hit render. It's going to start rendering it for us. Alright, so I'm just going to pause this, and then once it's done, then I'll just play this with some sound at the very end of this. So to wrap it up, this concludes the end of this Minigun tutorial series. So hopefully it's helped you understand Cinema 4D a little bit more. I know that we covered quite a bit in this series, all the way from modeling up to rendering. We did texturing, we did some espresso, we did some rigging, some targeting. We used the Xplode plugin, we did some animating, and all this kind of stuff. So I know that this was kind of a more in-depth tutorial versus usually what you see here on YouTube. So I guess that about wraps it up. So you guys can continue watching, because after this is going to be my little animation of the gun playing. So thanks for watching, guys.